Good evening and welcome to another episode of What's So Funny, the show that probes the minds, the brains, the psyches of the people who make the funny. It's Canada Day, so tonight we have a friend of Canada and of the show. Dwight Slade drove up the I-5 from Portland, Oregon to be with us. Well, and to headline at the Comedy Mix, but he sat down with us to record this very special episode. Why is it special? Because it's Dwight Slade. We start the chat running with me asking him if he was named after former President Dwight Eisenhower.
Born in the early 60s, parents Republican.
So maybe? Was Dwight Eisenhower a Republican?
Yes.
Okay. I should know that.
Well, he's the old style of Republican. He's the one who ranted against the military-industrial complex.
That's right.
I mean, literally rallied against it to a point where people were like, is he crazy? And now it would just be ridiculous to characterize a Republican as that.
Yeah. So he is your namesake.
I think my parents were influenced by that. They're very staunch Republican. And I apparently came out of the womb looking like a liberal and with a fresh face and hope, and they stuck me with a Republican name. There you go.
Are they still around?
No, both my parents are passed away. Or as I saw recently this sounds weird, but I was in a graveyard, and it said, I can't remember the guy's name that was on the tombstone, but it says, went to sleep 1847 or 1947. It's like, went to sleep. And they buried him?
They didn't like him.
Brutal.
Apparently. So how long have you been an orphan? I am too.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I mean, it's a product of age, right? We're the same age.
Correct.
Although, maybe not. The longer you live, the more people you see go.
True, and it's not something I'm looking forward to.
No. Going yourself?
Well, I'm not going to go.
Not the way you look.
Yes, that's right. That's right. I drink a stem cell smoothie every morning to preserve this 29-year-old preternatural body. No, and I'm wondering about that. I'm wondering, like, there's, and I don't need to get into grief right off the bat. Welcome to the show. Here's tragedy. But there does seem to be, every time you turn around in your life, there seems to be increasing amounts of tragedy that you have to care about. And I have this urge both to want to give, but also this urge to say, no, I can't do it anymore. I'm done. My empathy is to its max, and the tragedy meter is way over 11. And
for personal things, or just
yeah. I mean, you lose so much. You get to midlife and you lose so much. It's like, okay, I'm done, jumping into that arena anymore. Although it's one of the reasons I think that since we are the same age, you realize you get to midlife, and especially for men, that pain becomes no object when you reach midlife. As a man, it's like you've gone through child rearing, you've been through divorce, you've been through miserable relationships, you've lost parents, siblings, best friends, nephews. You've lost so much that it's like that. That's why I admire bullfighters, is because bullfighters get in the ring, and their nemesis and their pain is one thing. It's the bull, and I admire that. I would like to be, and plus the Matador outfit is just charming. It would be fabulous.
I'm not understanding completely. You're not looking forward to any more tragedy in your life, obviously. I mean, nobody is. And that's because you can't care about it?
Well, it's that
you care too much.
I don't want to care about it, to be quite honest with you. It's like, look, I have a life to live. And I'm sorry you've got cancer, but I know all about it. I've already been through that.
Right.
It's like, I've always thought of grief as sort of like O'Hare Airport, where, it sucks to be there, but at least you know where the bathrooms are. So grief is sort of like that. You look up at the itinerary for the plane. It's like delayed 3 hours. Here we are again. in O'Hare. Well, I know where that cool place to get a hot dog is. In other words, grief is a place you don't want to be, but if you've been there before, you know how to deal with it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that makes me, like empowered, the fact that I'm just not going to allow myself to care as much, or if it's a sign of cynicism coming up. But I'm at that point where it's like there's a lot of tragedy around, and I know there's more down the pike. This doesn't get it never goes less, It doesn't mean you lose less friends. That comic just passed away this week. John Fox, who was an American comic that notorious comic in America, a very party, good time comic, used to start his shows with an old joke. He'd walk up on stage and it would just first thing out of his mouth, "Two firemen are butt fucking in a smoke-filled room." And that was his opening joke. And it really set the stage for this tragic, out-of-control addict type of comic. But he passed away this week of stage 4 colon cancer. And the joke is, on the death certificate, John Fox's death certificate said cause of death, and it was written, "He's John Fox." But in other words,
does this cynicism turn to black humor like that?
Yeah, I think you could say that. I think you could say
and that's
that.
healthy.
I think it exercises the demons. My demons are on Stairmasters regularly. They are exercising thoroughly. So, I think it does get a little darker, which may surprise an audience when sort of like they're watching a comic do one type of material and suddenly something very dark, kind of oozes in, and they're like, "Whoa, what was that? He was just doing a crab impression. Now he's
talking about killing people.
Talking about a funeral? What's going on here?"
So how do you combat that? Do you want to go all dark, or do you like having that mix?
Sounds like an interview for a position as a porn star.
Do you do anal?
I'm glad you asked. I think my resume speaks for itself. I think it's a question that it's right now the tastes in stand-up are changing so much with the audience that I can't answer which way to go, because I would argue that sometimes I think just go ahead and be squeaky clean and be funny, be really, really funny and clean, because that gives you access to the most amount of people. And if you raise that standard for yourself, then even if you are doing darker elements to your stand-up, you are going to make them palatable or accessible to everybody. So why not work clean and make that a goal? And then the other side of the coin is that people like dark humor. There's an audience for that. They wait for it. You can tell. It's like you'll do this whole part of your act, and then suddenly you slip in something dark, and suddenly the part of the crowd just comes alive. And goes, "That's what we were waiting for."
Is that what you mean by the tastes of the audiences are changing?
Yes. Yeah. They're becoming they're afforded the luxury of being selective. Louis C.K. has an enormous following, and those people are going to like certain comics and not like other comics. And Jeff Dunham fills up arenas around the world, was one of the top 10 highest grossing live acts in the same category as U2 and Madonna around the world 2 years ago. And, he's a ventriloquist.
Yeah.
I just can't imagine going to an arena to see a ventriloquist. Did his lips move? Well, couldn't tell. A quarter mile away.
Yeah. But there's room for all kinds, right?
And that's the point, is that
But you kind of bridge the gap.
Well, maybe, and I hope that would maybe be the case, as I'm bridging the gap. Maybe it's a suicide bridge, a lot of people jumping off, or it's simply this old notion of trying to please everybody, which is a character flaw, I think.
You've always been a pleaser?
I think that's an element
in your life.
Yeah. I didn't do it last night, but I do a whole thing about that idea. And how does it play out? Well, it plays out that I've only recently started drinking, and as a habit, and I've been a non-drinker my whole life.
Like nothing.
Sober, yeah, teetotaler my whole life. I mean, occasionally.
Well, congratulations.
And now I'm drinking. And,
But not to excess, or
oh no, to excess.
to excess.
Yeah, I'm going for it, and
This was a conscious
yeah,
decision.
it was a conscious decision. Going well. Here's was the logic. I've been a non-drinker my whole life, and it hasn't worked out for me.
In what way? What do you
That
mean?
I don't have an excuse. And alcohol and drinking provide you with something very important, and it's accountability. It's accountability, something I've never had in my life. See, drunks go to AA because their life is miserable. There is no meeting for people that their lives are miserable because they're losers or because they're failures. There's no Failures Anonymous. I know because I've looked for the meeting, and you can't find it. It's just you're walking along, is this Failures Anonymous? And it's 6 guys in Ed Hardy shirts. No, this is Douchebags Anonymous. You're going to want to go down 3 windows down to Failures Anonymous. So that's what I have, and I realize this is very misguided, but at least alcohol, you have a reason for your life. Yeah, you have accountability for being your life in a shambles. Of course I was a failure as a husband. I was drunk. Doesn't that sound better than I was a failure as a husband because I'm, narcissistic, self-absorbed? I'm a loser. I'm an asshole. I mean...
So you consider yourself a failure?
I consider...
Is it because of the divorce?
No. I mean, I don't consider myself a failure, but I do see things in my life that would be... I beat myself up for, and with alcohol, it goes away. You know?
I see.
See, now you see. That's the beauty of it. You drink the alcohol, and you don't care about people. God, that's a liberation. I mean, I've spent my whole life concerned about what other people thought of me. With parents and teachers trying to please them, government trying to please them, women the hours I've spent trying to figure out what women want and understand them and putting a plastic smile on my face and listening to their endless, boring, pointless stories and laughing at the same punchline to every joke. Oh, wait, that's a different one. Oh, hold on. I got it. And just to wind up seeing the love of my life carted off in a Camaro as my pages of poetry get blown into the wind just because she likes bad guys. You drink the alcohol, you don't care about women, and then you get laid.
So you're finding this works for you?
I picked the lock, buddy.
So I didn't see you drinking last night.
No, because I wasn't doing the bit. Yeah, I wasn't doing the routine. So, why drink when you don't do the routine?
So it's not a nightly habit for you?
Well, it's I've had different relationships with alcohol, and so, and to be honest, I don't drink that much, but,
What's your drink?
Everything, He said with a great glaze in his eyes, everything, lots of it.
You were sober for your whole life, and when did you take your first drink?
Well, I did have a drink, to be honest. I had a drink at my friend's wedding years ago, just tried it, and what I found is that's the reason I avoid drinking, because 1 drink I found I went to sleep. I mean, literally nodding off. 3 drinks I would throw up. And that's the guy you don't want at the party, either asleep or vomiting in his sleep. Excellent. Yeah. But 4 drinks, 5 drinks, that's when I realized the fun started. 6 drinks, 7 drinks. I had to push myself. I wasn't applying myself. I needed an alcoholic guidance counselor to push me farther, to try harder. I haven't blacked out yet, but I'm looking forward to that. What a great thing that is.
So, okay, now I am confused. Is this a bit or is this your real life?
It's a
combination or an exaggeration.
It's a hybrid animation combination.
Okay, but so you're not a teetotaler anymore.
No.
Okay.
No. And I've gone, the distance in terms of where I'm going to wind up, but. I do remember at one point saying, I'm going to be a drinker. I'm going to be a drinker like Hemingway. I'm going to be a hard drinker. That's me now. That's what I'm going to be.
The new Dwight.
Right. And then I promptly slipped on some snow-covered stairs and cracked a rib and went, okay, well, maybe there are downsides to this.
Yeah, you don't want to be quite like Hemingway. So, but you know, you never thought the reason you look so good is because you haven't been drinking your whole life.
Well, first, thank you. Second, yes, I have thought that there does seem to be a correlation between drinking and aging.
Yeah, you're not bloated.
That's right. Not quite toxic
Yeah.
looking yet. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Alcohol, substance abuse does take its toll.
Right.
And I haven't done that much. So that could be a reason.
And also, yeah, drugs, right? A lot of comics get into alcohol or drugs.
Sure.
And you've always avoided that?
I have not indulged much in drugs. I think the issue is not the drug or doing drugs or alcohol. The issue is having an understanding of what addiction is. And so I've figured out that I have a system to beat. No, I'm kidding. That anyone would have a system to beat addiction, but
well, if you're as long as you're aware of it,
right? Well, that's what I've tried to tell my kids, especially when they get, they have those ridiculous meetings about smoking when they're in third grade, and all the kids are supposed to stand up and say no to smoking, and they make the kids stand up and shriek at the top of their lungs, no,
which is fine when you're 8.
Yeah. But the point is that why lie to children? Why not tell them the truth, which is it's not about cigarettes, it's not about alcohol, it's not about drugs, it's about the disease of addiction. And if they get the truth right from the start, maybe they won't be so cynical and realize that, oh, the same adults that are telling me to say no to this are freaking addicts,
Just in other areas.
Yes.
Yeah. And have they taken to that?
I think...
how old are they?
Well, they're both in rehab. I haven't seen them in years. My kids are older. My daughter's moved in with her boyfriend, which is hard because she's 9. And that seems early. These play dates are really getting out of hand.
That's the kids today.
Yeah, my daughter's 20, and she moved in with her boyfriend, and which is hard to see, your princess of your life carted away by some guy in a Rastafarian hemp cap. Maybe the Taliban isn't wrong about everything. Maybe women shouldn't be allowed to make their own decisions. Maybe the Taliban is on Dad's side.
Do you like the guy though?
I do. That's the thing. Is I really think he's cool, even though he has a little bit of that Eddie Haskell.
Right. He's a little too nice.
Yes. Well, you can just see it's that, hello, Mr. Slade. And, but he's a really cool kid. And, but the impulse as a father is to punch boyfriend, to hurt boyfriend, to want to fight boyfriend. But I look at boyfriend and I realize that he could probably take me. And that, I mean, I look solid, but I'm, I own a Camry. I'm not a fighter, for Christ's sake. And that's a fight you don't want to lose. When you're fighting for your daughter's honor and you're starting the shit, you don't want to lose that battle. No. Better let him just get it on in the guest bedroom, and the next morning everyone pretends it didn't happen.
Yeah, sure.
Make waffles and smile.
Do you work out all the time?
I not all the time, but
you do.
Okay. I'm a big runner. I enjoy running a lot.
That explains a lot.
Yes.
I was hoping there was some way where you didn't work out and you just, maintain this physique and this youthful air about you. You had a big birthday this year.
I did. Yep.
Turned 40.
40-ish. Well, I'm closer to 35 than I am to 40, so.
Excuse me?
Wait a minute, I'm closer. No, I'm closer to 40 than I am 35. That's what someone told me to throw people off. That way people think you're lying, but you are lying to one benefit. Anyway, right. Sort of telling the truth.
I'm going to try that. Just an odd concept to think you're that old.
Yes, it's not the way you perceived it when you were younger.
No,
the idea of this, and it's something that our generation is sort of dealing with. Is that we have to sort of redefine what I mean. That whole nonsense about 70 is the new 60 and but it does point to the fact that this generation is so self-absorbed. The baby boomers are so self-absorbed and narcissistic that we insist on eternal youth, and You know, but again, you know, our generation grew up listening to Led Zeppelin, listening to killer rock and roll, which is the kind of anthem of youth. It's this, I mean, you put that into your nervous system and it has to have some effect on it, this eternal sort of youthful sound, and it's part of your life. It's part of your cells. I mean, and I think it has an effect that people kind of expect to stay young.
Right. But as we are at the age where we're at, we expect to stay young and maybe act younger than our parents did at this age. But really, we're still that age.
It's very true.
And you may not get it because you look at least 10 years younger.
Oh, thank you.
Or do you at all? Like, do you find that the younger people are going, oh, got to talk different around the old guy?
Yeah, it's a nebulous area that there are no rules for when you're sort of a crusty old man on the inside, but outside you sort of have the game show host body. Or, hey, how's it going? Yeah, everything's good. But
you've probably always been a crusty old man on the inside, haven't you?
Yeah, it's true.
Like me.
An old soul.
Yeah.
People think that being an old soul is some gift of spirituality. No, it means you're cynical at age 8. But it does lead to the notion of, like, I don't like people perceiving me one way, and that is inappropriate. I don't want to be perceived as like the veteran old guy who, oh, here he is. He had his chance, and there he is. I want to still be in the game.
Well, you are.
Yeah, I would hope so.
Yeah.
I want to be relevant. I want to be, considered a comic. I still want to have goals. I still want to achieve things. So I think that,
In the industry, is there? Do you come across ageism?
In Hollywood? Why would you say that? Yeah, it's ridiculous.
I mean, but in a tangible way, to you, is it ever spoken or is it just implied?
Well, what it is this. I have an agent in Hollywood. I've had him for years, and he's a great agent. But he sends me out on stuff that's, quote, my age. And every audition I go to, they look at me and they go, "Oh, you're too young. You're too young for this part." And like I auditioned for the father in Modern Family, and they just said, "No, you're too young. You're too young." And it's like I want to say to my agent, "Look, you can't book me just because the way it says on a piece of paper. You got to look at me and go, I'm castable in this role or castable in that role."
And you don't tell him that, or do you?
Should I tell him?
Yeah.
Maybe that's what I need a manager for. That's what managers are supposed to do.
Yeah.
Anyway, but he's a very patient guy. Anyway,
so you're going up for acting roles too.
I have over the years. Yes.
Yeah. You've done some acting. I know.
Some acting. Yes.
Yeah. And you wanted to be an actor when you were a kid.
Oh, you remember? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well, I heard it somewhere.
Yeah. Well, that was probably could be in that documentary. But yeah, I was always interested in acting, and I think it's the hardest performing art that there is anywhere, especially good acting. That's what I learned, is that it's a hard performing art to get down.
Yeah.
And you can fake it really well, but it's those rare great actors they're staggering in their talent. You don't because the thing is that as most artists, they play an instrument, and for good actors play their body, psyche, spirit, soul. They play that as an instrument, and to be able to learn that process in yourself of having to play that and become a character and become is remarkable to me, and has always been a great inspiration. It's hard.
And the better they are, the easier it looks. So that's tough.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. You've been away from Vancouver for a few years. Mm-hmm. Any particular reason?
I think I just got busy, and there was a lot of changes in comedy here in Vancouver. This has been always an amazing city for stand-up, to watch its evolution and peaks and valleys, if you will. So it's just been a process of just not getting up here and hammering on the right door and saying, "Hey, let's put this together."
Are we in the peak or the valley now?
I think I sense that Vancouver's sort of coming back into a real peak. I get that. There's really talented guys here, both veterans and new comics, and there's plenty of places to go out and do it. there isn't a burden, I don't think, of like, well, you got to work one club or another, and there's not allegiances, and there's really creative, great comics here.
Is it a peak throughout North America? I mean, it's sort of a renaissance or a new boom, maybe? How's Portland?
Portland is one of those towns that, and it's interesting living there for as long as I have and finally see it reach this zenith as being sort of the darling, one of those darling cities of the U.S., you know, kind of like Austin and Minneapolis, and people really like it. And it's sort of like, oh, the great new places to eat are in Portland, and it's, you know, Hollywood thinks it's cool, and it's an amazing. The stand-up scene is really just blown up in the last year, 2 years. Just it has a great festival that's well respected, and 2 great clubs, and a host of really very talented young comics, tons of open mics, and anyway.
Yeah, you say Hollywood loves it. How do the regular Portlandians take to, I don't know what you call yourselves, is that right?
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Take to Portlandia, the show, and the image that Portland has.
Yeah, I think that...
you take it like it's funny, or do you get up in arms and go, hey, come on, we're not all like that?
Well, let's put it this way. Jackie Cation, who was so brilliant, had a great, really the best line I've heard about Portland. She said, I love Portland as much as anybody, unless that anybody is from Portland. The point being is that there's a great population in Portland who are their own best cheerleaders, and they're incredibly annoying. You know, they love the fact that, oh, we have food carts. Oh, we have restaurants. Oh, we have alternative comedy. Oh, we have legal marijuana. Oh, you know, shut up.
So you were last on this show, 2008, 4 years ago, and I think it was February and you won the Boston competition that year.
It was the end of 2008 that I won the Boston Comedy Festival. I think I was here in 2009 of February when we did it last. But
I believe, Dwight, when we did the show, my record state, 2008. So I'd like to think that this show propelled you to the Boston Comedy Competition, being the winner. So after today, skyrocketing.
You're right. I have the essence of Guy.
So what did that mean for you, winning that?
Well, I did it because I started working cruise ships in 2007 to supplement my income. And I was on cruise ships, dressed up in a little suit with shiny shoes, entertaining old people and cruise people, and it was killing me.
Really?
And I thought to myself, I'm not a comic anymore. I'm out to stud. I'm out in the field now. Remember his glory days? And so I saw the Boston Festival as a way to wake up as a comic and go, you know, I'd just like to see if I can do 8 minutes anonymously, just amongst a bunch of comedians, and see if I can still do that. So I worked very hard at it, and it was at the end of it all, it was very gratifying, and I felt like I had, at least for myself, I had proven something to myself, that I was still relevant, still knew how to do it. Although doing those competitions, you know, afterwards, you know, if you win it, you always have this great elation, and you realize you're the only person that's happy. You know, the promoter, the guy who's putting it on, never makes enough money. All the other comics feel shitty because they didn't win, and they have a chip on their shoulder about you. And I'm being cynical, but you're at the party, and everyone else is sort of just in their own world, and you're like, hey, isn't this great? Not really. No, it's not great.
So there must have been a prize, some money involved.
Yeah. There's a nice...
Anything else that came from that?
I did get an education that the Boston comedy market has a lot of backstabbing in it and politics, because I have only been back there once since then, and it was for a weekend show at just some anonymous club that was doing it for a little while. In other words, the market of the Northeast didn't magically open for me, you know. Like, I remember calling the the Comedy Connection in Portland, Maine, and I said, "Hey, I just won this thing," and just no return call, no email, no. And I was like, "What is?" And then I asked, and they don't really acknowledge that. They don't get along with. Oh, okay, whatever. So I don't know if I have time for that.
You've done other competitions in your life.
I have. I've done Seattle several times, and did San Francisco the year that Doug Stanhope won.
And you came in third.
Yes, it was Doug Stanhope, Dane Cook, and then me.
Yeah.
So, and to that, I would say that I don't, competitions are slightly exploitive of talent. They kind of abuse the notion of your art, which is why are we doing a winner and loser when it comes to creativity. But at the same time, the practical thing is that I always encourage comedians now to do it, because it's important to do stand-up when something is at stake. It's easy to do stand-up when nothing's at stake, when you don't have to prove anything, or you can fail and it doesn't matter. But when you have to do it and something's important, or you even perceive it's important, that's when you get stronger as a stand-up.
And to be able to act like it's not important. Because some comics do competitions, and I see them, and you say it's easy to do it when there's nothing at stake. They get on stage during a competition, and they tense up, or they're not having fun up there, right? So it's a completely different thing. And I guess, is that the same muscle you'd use on a TV show or
Exactly.
something?
And that's the benefit, is that stand-up is built in 3 to 6 minutes in terms of how you're judged. The point is that people always used to say, well, how in Star Search can you only get 2 minutes? Who can judge a comic in 2 minutes? It's easy. If you're not funny in 2 minutes, you're not going to be funny in 5. Okay? It's just, that's the rule. Don't think that more time of mediocrity is going to make you good. You got to be fantastic out of the box. 2 minutes is plenty of time to judge whether you're going to be good or not, or to whether something is funny or not.
Yeah, and if you're sitting in the audience at a club, oftentimes an audience will give a comic 30 seconds. I don't like this guy.
Yeah, stand-up is a great example of well begun is half done. If you can, in the first 30 to 45 seconds, if you can get those people rocking, half your work is done.
Oh, yeah?
You can coast for a little while, and as long as your ending is good, people will walk out of it going, he was great. The beginning is so important, and it's hard. It's the hardest thing to do, in my opinion, is get that first 45 seconds where people are laughing and rocking, where they're like, this is friggin' hilarious.
So you tell young comics to do competitions and give them advice. Have you ever taught comedy?
And I think I did one little workshop once called A Tight 10, which was about what we're talking about, the fact that the industry is based on 6 to 10 minute auditions, and the importance of getting to the joke and the economy in a joke and get to it. I don't need a lot of explanation and a lot of narrative. Get to the funny part. It's something I have to remind myself a lot.
Although you say tastes are changing.
Yes, they are.
And, the alternative style of comedy is more...
Patient.
Patient. That's a good way of putting it.
And it's just, that, and you're right. That is the thing, is that you watch some comics and people really like comics who take their time or are eclectic and do things in a roundabout way.
Sort of meander.
And non-traditional. And it's just the difference between, stand-up is getting to the point where it's not just, quote, rock and roll music. It's becoming the difference between Death Cab for Cutie and Bruce Springsteen. And I guess I would identify myself more the Bruce Springsteen, which is I want stand-up to be rock and roll. I want it to be rocking. I like comics that are like that.
Bringing energy.
Who can get a crowd really rocking and roaring. And I admire that, and it may be kind of an archaic thing,
I saw a kid at your show last night at the Comedy Mix, doubled over, could barely breathe, bringing in enough
that's when it's
air.
That's what I like.
Slapping his thigh.
Yeah, I saw Sam Kinison at the Comedy Store in L.A. years and years back in the 80s, before he'd really broken, and he was doing his best 20. and he was doing the thing of the joke was, you've seen a lot of comedy here tonight. That's good. And a lot of the comics you may want to see again. But you're going to wish to God you never saw me. You will beg. And he just went into this rant, and I saw a guy doubling up, and then when Sam wouldn't finish, he literally fell out of the chair. And it was literally falling out of the chair. He just fell out. And I was like, damn.
That's how you do it?
Wow.
But, of course, he walked a lot of people, too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I saw him when he had this 20 minutes that was, he was showcasing every week. And it was freaking tight. And just, man, he went on and just, it was from start to finish, it was just raw Sam.
Now, he was a Houston guy, as you were, for a little while anyway, right?
I had connections with that scene. I mean, the scene went on. I didn't really ever participate in it, but I knew Sam and I remember meeting him in 1980.
Now, when did you move away?
I moved away in 78 when things really, it was like 79 that Houston really started getting its own local scene that was really heavy. And then Bill and I were doing sets in 78 at the comedy workshop.
But you weren't part of the scene.
No, by the time I left. And plus, we were talking about kids that are 16, 17. We're in high school, for God's sakes. You know, what scene can you be a part of? But I remember when Bill and I, we were still working on our duo act. And even after I had moved away, we were kind of planning this stuff. And then it became apparent. It was like, well, maybe we should do this on our own. And Bill took a year off. But then he came back, and he had his own voice, his own way of looking at things, and it was terrific.
We're talking about Bill Hicks, your old high school friend, and the documentary you mentioned earlier called American, the Bill Hicks story.
Yes.
And you were in that. Were you part of it in any production kind of way?
Only to the effect that I asked the filmmakers, I said, if you want me to do this, I want you to, I did say I'd kind of like to be listed as a producer, but I think I said that up front because I wanted them to be serious about it. I was going to be, if you're going to make money on, or want to make money on my memories and my cherished relationship with a dear friend of mine, then I want to have control over it. But I realized that these guys, they probably don't even remember that conversation, but these guys are really, truly great people, and they were in it for all the right reasons. And so I didn't really make a point of being listed as a producer. But
and you're happy with the finished product?
I'm thrilled with it.
Anything they left out?
They left out, I mean, they were very thorough, and the original running time was really long, and they didn't know what to leave out and what to put in. So there was a lot of stuff. I mean, I think they interviewed me for 2 days for 8 hours each. It was literally 8 hours of talking all day. And so they had 16 hours of interviews and details to go through. I can't imagine what kind of project that was.
You mentioned that you went away and Bill took a year off. And when he came back, he had his own voice, a different voice. Was that a Bill that you recognized when you were hanging out with him?
Absolutely. And it was when Bill was, I mean, talking about a guy who was 18 years old, 17, 18 years old, and he was different than he became, but that's a great thing about an artist is you evolve. But he had the elements that make Bill wonderful, which was he had a great innate sense of phrasing and writing and brilliant performance. Just, he was always a brilliant performer, and that's a rare gift to be both a great writer and performer. That's kind of like Pryor is. Pryor was that amazing performer, brilliant writer. But you can see that even in Bill's early stuff, his act out and the way he performs stuff is just so brilliant. Yeah,
and that's something that is lost, isn't it, a little bit? In his mystique, in his legend?
Well, it's one of the things where it's so talented, I think people do, like you say, it looks so easy that it gets overlooked. But I think people don't realize that was every bit he does is an act out where he creates a world and he creates the character and he makes it for you. And I've always admired that. And if you would ask me honestly, I would hope that that I was one of the people in his life that mirrored that for him, because I'm also very physical and very act out, and I think that when we were together, that's what we did. We created characters, we did scenarios, we did kind of little sketches in between us, and I would hope that that's the thing that taught him that the importance of acting out. Because when Bill and I met, he was writing Woody Allen jokes. It was all one-liners, and his monologues.
Woody Allen style jokes?
Woody Allen style jokes,
yeah,
style.
Yeah.
And so...
I was just listening on the way here to the rebroadcast of the Ron Schock interview with Mark Maron. And they were talking. I got out of the car just as they were discussing Bill's craft and what a great craftsman he was, right? And that's what I think, because a lot of people just think of him, oh, he was this political guy, right? But they said he could really write a one-liner. He could really write a joke.
Yeah.
So he was using these Woody Allen type jokes, but making them his own in longer bits, right?
Right. He had all the elements. He was a brilliant writer and a great sense of economy and how to construct a joke, and just this brilliant performer. And he also had that, I hate to use the word Q factor, but he had a charisma that was disturbing to watch as another performer, because you realize that you don't have it. I remember working with him in San Francisco, and I was no slouch going up and doing my set. And I would get off stage feeling good about my set. And then Bill would walk on stage, and it was just as if nobody had been there the whole night. It's like you could just see the audience just suddenly just get this wash over them, and this hypnotic, slow, gradual giving up into this man's world. And it's just, he was such a commanding presence as soon as he stepped on stage. It was...
And the audience didn't know him.
No,
right?
Didn't know.
So that's the part that needs to be stressed.
Right.
He had such a magnetic presence that the audience took to him without even knowing who he is.
Right. And some people were, were irritated by that. You could tell some people were like, well, who's this guy? But it was only because he was so striking on stage. I mean, not physically, but there was something there. It was this command of the craft, and people would just slowly get sucked into it.
They're coming now.
Mm-hmm. We're doing this show in the 3rd precinct of Baltimore.
So the guy I do the show with, Kevin, you've never met, I don't think. He's not a big fan of Bill Hicks. So I asked him last night, what could I ask Dwight about that what's missing from him? Because he's a huge Carlin fan, right? And I mean, often Hicks gets compared to Carlin. And maybe his output wasn't as great as Carlin, so maybe Kevin hasn't heard as much. Possible, right? So he says that it seems like he's going after easy or obvious targets a lot of times.
Well, I think that would be a criticism of the way Bill has been packaged since he has passed away, and not really accurate. If you want to, has your partner ever seen Sane Man?
I don't know.
Well, Sane Man was a self-produced production. He and a friend of mine, Kevin, put it together. But Sane Man was done at the Laugh Stop in Austin, Texas, and it was produced just by, he paid for it himself, and he just did it. And it's the most brutally uncensored, raw Bill that you can watch. And very good production. And it's been remastered because it was all done in 3/4 inch back in 88 or 89. A long time ago. But everything still works, and everything's still valid. And watch that and see if you don't understand what Bill is. It's the funniest thing about that Bill is out there.
Yeah, okay.
And it's the rawest, best. And it's almost as if for 20 minutes you can tell that Bill's sort of playing for the camera. He's doing his best stuff, and then it just clicks, and he doesn't care about the camera. He doesn't care about anything. He just cares about getting this shit out, and it's wonderful to watch.
The other image we have of him is his disdain for an audience. But that wasn't every audience, was it?
Mm-hmm. No, he he adored the audience. I mean, that's another thing about Sane Man, is that you can see he works with the audience like he doesn't work in different ways. He was brilliant enough to know that he always had to play both sides of the fence, that he could push the envelope and be edgy, but he had to do it in a way that he didn't completely lose the audience. And he had little tricks for that. He had little techniques, and he was always aware of it. And disdain is one of the ways to do it. You disdain somebody, and it just actually works to attract them. Like, oh, I want to be part of this. You know, I want him to like me. And
so it was well thought out.
I think it was just instinctual.
Oh,
I don't think it was. Yeah, I think Bill was very.
When you talk about his presence, the presence that he had, when you mentioned San Francisco, working with him there, was that a conscious thing, the way he acted, or is that just the way he was?
I think it was sort of this amplification of who he was. When he stepped on stage, he allowed himself to sort of become this force of nature,
larger than life,
right? And just this is who I am, and he allowed it to happen.
Kevin also said that is it satire that he's doing, or is he just lambasting the people he doesn't like or doesn't agree with?
Good question, Kevin. Because I asked Bill one time, I said, what happens when you look out at the audience and there's that guy in the front row with his arms crossed, and he has a baseball cap on, and he's looking up at you, and he's got a look of complete confusion, and disgust. Like, I don't understand this. I don't know why I'm here. This isn't what I like. And Bill said, well, first, I don't ever look at the audience, which is not entirely true, but his point being that the artist can never construct his creativity for the benefit of a perceived audience. The artist can't play to an audience. The artist has to play to his artistic sense, which doesn't mean that you ignore the audience when you're in a situation where you're an entertainer. But at the same time, he had a really understanding of the disdain is more of idea like, I don't have to play to you. I have to get this shit out. I saw him I stayed with him in New York, and he did a show out at Governor's on Long Island, and he was doing stuff about pornography. He was doing stuff about the Backstreet Boys, and it was really rough to watch. Rough only that he was vile. He was so full of poison and hate of these things that it did alienate the audience. And he went on and on and on. And I could tell people were like, you know, when are you going to get through this? Where's the happy punchlines here? And it was like, and I was like, wow, man, Bill is just brutal on these poor guys. And then I see him 6 months later in San Francisco, and same themes, same jokes, but he worked it all out. And it was this just slicing, bitter, perfectly orchestrated criticism of the Backstreet Boys and pornography and the Clarence Thomas trials, and Anita Hill and Clarence Thomas, and that it was just this razor sharp. And I realized, oh, that's what the show at Governor's was all about, was that he was getting it out. And you got to get it out. And this was his process as an artist, was to get it out, regardless of what the audience thought, but he did it where there was something at stake, a live show. And 6 months later, it was frickin' perfect.
More palatable.
It was perfectly palatable.
Yeah.
It was offensive, but not offensive enough. I mean, not too offensive. In other words, I just remember him going through it, and it was just, you know, the language was just brutal. And then he did it, and it was like, this could all be used on national television, really. You know, there's nothing here that is too bad. And it was magnificent to watch.
Hey, when you asked him about the audience member sitting there with his arms crossed and the ball cap on, that's coming from Dwight the Pleaser? You would notice that guy,
yes,
and you would try to not offend?
I would, yeah, and I would, well, it would bother me. Like, for example, I remember once Bill and I we worked together a number of times, and we worked at the Funny Firm in Chicago, and he was booked there 4 times a year, and they were doing 14 shows a week. Yeah. So he was doing, and he felt obligated to do new material. He got tired of doing the same stuff all the time. And I could tell when he was working new things out on stage, and the shows weren't going as well as they had. And in fact, the booker came up to me and said, "Can you talk to Bill? Why won't he do his old funny stuff? Can you talk to him?" I mean, he was pleading with me. Can we do something?
Did you?
And so, no. But the point being is that we were walking out of the club, and Bill was behind me. We're walking out, and the woman turned to me and said, "I thought you were so much funnier than the headliner," not knowing Bill was behind me.
Mm-hmm.
And Bill put his head over my shoulder and said in this fake sarcastic voice, goes, "Thank you so much." But we went out to dinner that night, and it did not seem to bother him at all. That would devastate me back then. It would.
Right.
I would have been devastated. I mean, like literally back in my hotel room going, "God, I gotta step this up," you know. And I think Bill took it as a badge of honor. Like, you know what? I'm working on new stuff. So sorry, your little party didn't go well.
Yeah. You would have taken it to heart maybe, but now you realize there's just different styles for different people. Some people like more serious, angry comedy. Mm-hmm. Some people like lighter stuff. There was a guy, I was listening to you have a conversation last night at the club, a British guy who just revered Hicks as most people in England did and do to this day, right? And he was just mentioning, it seemed like it was a bit of a disconnect in his head. Like, you guys were best friends, yet you're so different. I was like, well, why is that strange? I was wondering. Do you often get that from people, like that your styles are so different?
Well, I think what I that's one of the reasons I can't do shows in the UK is because, and I've learned this, even though I enjoy working over in the UK, but you can't. Club owners always book me as Bill Hicks's mate, Bill Hicks's old friend. People come out for that reason, and then they draw a comparison. You can't help but go, "This is the guy. This is the guy who grew up with Bill." And so the elements of me that are similar to Bill become always copying Bill. Right. And then when I'm not like Bill, then they're like disappointed. Like, oh, he's not rallying against, you know, the corporate bureaucracy and not that those elements aren't important to me, but I'm just a different comic. And I'm absolutely okay with that.
So it's no win for you.
It's a no-win.
Either you're copying him or you're nothing like him.
That's right.
But you've been reviewed well there.
It seems like they've been generous, and so it's been nice. Yeah, but they don't. I think they get Bill more than they get me. I'm more of a screamer than I think that Bill was a screamer. But in fact, American comics are screamers, and it's a phenomena that I adore about North America, and so also in Canada, there's great screamers, but America has great screamers, and it's perfectly American that we have the screaming man who stands on a stage and lets it all out, you know, and his outrage is sort of, you know, what I would hope would be the element of the rebellion, the rebellious American. You know, Gilbert Gottfried's a screamer, Dane Cook's a great screamer. Brian Regan, incredible screamer. Sam Kinison, the screaming king. Yeah. And in the UK, it frightens them. They do not know how to handle screaming on stage. They really think you've lost your mind.
They're more genteel.
Yes.
I guess.
And they listen. They're patient and they listen. Right. And, you know, when you perform in front of Americans, you have to be loud and be in their face because they are so stupid they don't get it.
There was the book on Hicks. The first one was called The Scream, right? Or American Scream. Yeah. And that was okay?
Great. Yeah. It's great.
So what is a big, I mean, like I mentioned, he's this mythic figure now. To you, he's a real human being. What is it? Are there misconceptions out there about him?
Well, I think it's becoming, people are getting more clarity about Bill. When he was, you know, when he passed away, I saw one thing in the UK press that death comic passes away and the dark comic passes away. And it's like, whoa, that's not Bill at all. He's not the dark character. He's not the death comic. He's not, you know, he's this really, you know, he had this sense of outrage that was deep and unlimited, but he had a great sense of hope and light in his life. He was a very spiritual guy, very kind, very, very self-aware, and had I want to say self-aware. He was he always felt like he was in the way, and that's something you wouldn't expect of such a confident figure. Is he always felt this real healthy shame about humility, if you will, and so I think people miss that. And he was a dear friend. He was a friend that that people are. I realize now as an adult and going through midlife that you rarely have friends like that. You don't have a friend that you love so much and you get along so well. And he was like that. If you were his friend, he was all in your shit, always calling you constantly, wanting to talk all the time, hang out all the time, go eat every meal together. It was like you're mine, and he would just wrap yourself around you, and you'd become in his world, and that was very intoxicating and very rare. It was, very much a Huckleberry Finn, Tom Sawyer type of feel when I look back at our early days, that we were just these two guys sort of walking down the railroad tracks talking endlessly about nothing on a summer day. It was just, that was the beautiful thing about being with him.
Mm-hmm. So people see what's on stage and think that's how he is all the time. And that's a common problem with comedians, I guess.
And it's true.
Or actors.
It was a very animated, blown up version of him, but he was so...
There was one part of him, too.
Yeah. He was so passionate. He was passionate about everything. And he believed in his passion. He thought... He never questioned whether it was right or wrong. It was just that, look, I just need to get this out. And I feel this strongly about it. And here's the reasons I feel so strongly about it. And he just happened to always... What I liked about him was that he never let himself off the hook. He knew he had to get laughs or make it really, really cool and interesting. And it may be part of Kevin's criticism, which is valid, is that the way Bill is presented is this renegade sort of commentary, political commentary. And Bill would never be satisfied with that. Bill wanted to be funny first and important and listen second,
Yeah, because you guys... As you say, he was writing Woody Allen type jokes, and you guys used to watch The Tonight Show. Mm-hmm. So, as I mentioned, we're the same age. Who were the people you were watching then and admiring, or not?
Well, we were blown away by other guys who wrote great jokes, which was like Ed Bluestone, Billy Braver.
Don't know Billy Braver.
Billy Braver.
He was on The Tonight Show?
Yeah, he did The Tonight Show a number of times.
Oh, wow.
Brilliant comic. And it's a shame that more people don't know about him. And he was even on Hollywood Squares. He got to that point where he was on Hollywood Squares a few times. And I'm sure there's comics older, but veteran comics from New York who would know him, because he was a New York comic. But he was brilliant joke writer. And almost Stephen Wright-ish. He had that very slow cadence. And I haven't even thought to look on YouTube to see if there's Billy Braver.
I'm going to do that.
But yeah, I would. He was a huge hero of Bill's and I's. And we saw Richard Lewis do one of his first TV spot.
Right.
We hated him. We hated him. Stephen Landisberg, though,
loved Steve Landisberg.
Was a guy that we were big fans with. David Brenner we were big fans of.
Not so much.
We Steve Martin, when he first came on the scene, we were blown away by him. Bill would cassette record comics off the Tonight Show, and I would record other comics like off of Merv Griffin or the Midnight Special or
Mike Douglas,
Dinah Shore, or wherever they appeared, and we would trade and compare. And
so you were the original comedy nerds.
Yeah, we were. I mean, to be honest, Bill was sort of really into this, and then when I looked at it, I really got into it. So it was. I kind of just tagged along in Bill's enthusiasm, but became very enthusiastic also. And
yeah, there's. I wonder, is Bluestone still around?
I did see his name. I think he was executive producer of a couple of TV shows, so he kind of moved into that arena. But I did see something with him in it once, and anyways, and it was nice to see. He was so funny. He He goes, one of his jokes was, "I'm what you refer to as a quadrisexual. I'll do anything with anyone for a quarter." Just freaking great written jokes.
Yeah. Then the guys that I didn't like so much on the Tonight Show, I remember Bobby Kelton was on a lot.
True. Yeah.
And
Kelly Monteith.
Kelly Monteith. he did well in England, didn't he? After that,
I think so. Yeah. And he still appears every now and then on cruise ships. I've always kind of hoped I would run into him because he was a big influence.
Yeah.
But I was sort of like with you. I was sort of like he had one or two really, really, really strong bits, and then the rest. That's the great thing about that Steve Martin book is it really underscores how odd it was in the mid 70s to late 70s that if you were a comic, they gave you spots over and over again, and you just had to fill the time. You just had to go out and get it. It's like, oh, we're going to book you in 6 months. Write something. And they would, that's what Kelly Monteith probably had to do. I got to come out and come up with 7 minutes. I already got the booking.
Those were good years. Oh yeah, so you say he was a great friend. He got into alcohol and drugs, and did you ever have the talk with him? Because you never got into that. Like, were you? Hey, come on, Bill.
Nope. Never had to.
So it was never a problem between the two of you.
I think he saw me in his life as sort of the guy who had a lot of his personal life together. And so I had a couple of late night calls from him that were like, I got a problem. I can't sleep. I'm having problems, and I just had to sort of patiently listen to him. But I think that he always sort of, with himself knew that he could recover, but he just needed to know when and how. I mean, when and how it was all going to happen for him. And it was AA finally.
And he did recover.
He was, he was going through recovery, and as it is in AA, you never recover.
Yeah,
But he was clean and sober for many years, up until he died.
And did you guys go through, like all friends, good and bad times, fights, and not talking to each other?
Well, when he got into drugs and alcohol, we didn't communicate much, just because I think he was ashamed of it a bit. Mm-hmm. Here I was married and I had a kid, and so it's like he was like, I think he had this great, respect for me not to drag his shit into my life, which seemed to him to be this Pollyannish, success. So we didn't have a lot of communication during that. But then when he got clean and sober, he was a wonderful to my kids and my ex-wife.
Right. You mentioned cruise ships. Now are you still doing them, by the way?
Speaking of addictions, speaking of ingesting substances you shouldn't, I still haven't done as many as I have in the past, but I still put my hat in there and do like one every couple months.
And why not?
Well, here's what's happening.
The stigma. Well, it's changing, right?
Right. And what cruise ships wisely are figuring out is that retirees and people who are going cruises now grew up with stand-up, and that it's cheaper to produce a stand-up show than a cheesy Broadway burlesque show. And so why not? So like, for example, Carnival Cruises now has converted their entire fleet, 27 ships, to have a comedy club on board.
A club.
Where it's just like a club, and you're encouraged to be, just be like it's a club. They want people to have that experience of going to a comedy club. Now, never mind, these people have never been to a comedy club, really, but they're fans of stand-up. They like blue-collar comedy. They like Jeff Dunham. They like that kind of comedy, and this is sort of something different that they can do on their vacation. And so, what I find is that maybe the audiences on cruise ships aren't sophisticated. They're not stand-up fans per se. They don't get what stand-up, sort of the mechanics of it and why certain things work and why, and they don't get a lot of the jokes. But at the same time, it's a nice experience for them to go. We went to a nightclub and saw a comic. Ooh.
I think the image now, we talk about being in middle age, and I can project, to see somebody who's 60 and 70 and think they were teenagers or young adults in the 60s and 70s. Mm-hmm. They're not going to be offended by a lot.
Yeah.
Right?
It's true.
But our image of old people is, oh,
Mhm.
you got to watch what you say.
Mhm.
But they probably are, fine with it.
Well, here's the thing: is that on Carnival they would have one family show, and then they would have 2 late night adult shows, and they would find that no one would go to the family show, no one would go to the clean show, everyone would come to the R-rated shows, and so they cut the family show back, and now they just have one small clean show, which and my stuff isn't dirty anyway. I can do it in either place, and so and then they have the adult show. People love it.
Yeah.
They want to see a comics, cut loose.
I've never been on a cruise, but if I were, I'd want there to be a comedy club.
Yes.
Yeah. And as long as you're on the cruise that isn't tipping over, or, through the rough seas, I've seen some videos of, have you been through anything bad on the cruise?
I did a cruise in Alaska, and we cut from Kodiak to Juneau, right across the Gulf of Alaska, in the middle of it. And it was very much similar to that. The waves were ridiculous, and my hat is off to Canada, because in Canada you can buy gravel.
Oh, you can't in the States?
It's not in the States.
Is there something equivalent?
There's nothing even equivalent to it. And gravel is an anti-nausea first, and then it sort of relaxes you second. Really.
Puts you to sleep, I think, too. Maybe.
Yes, it does. But it was made for anti-nausea, and so the ships were. I was on this. I mean, you wouldn't believe the waves that were going through. It was ridiculous. But they still opened the dining room for anybody. They can't deprive the passengers of food.
No, they're not going to want to eat in that.
Right. So the dining room's empty. I popped 2 gravel, had a cocktail, and I was eating like a horse. And you look out the window, and the horizon was going clear to the top of these 25-foot windows and going all the way to the bottom. That's what I was looking at, is the horizon.
Jeez.
Anyway.
And you're fine with that, or do you think we're going down?
Well, I have I have a great sort of self pragmatism, and if we go down, we go down. I'm fine with checking out. I'm not so attached to this world that we have to. Anyway,
No, it sounds like
I know it sounds prophetic.
We're ending where we started.
Yeah, I know.
It's coming full circle. So let's not end there. I just want a couple more things. You mentioned last night here you're playing the Comedy Mix this weekend, which is a few weekends in the past now. And you say what a good room this is. And I hear this a lot from comics. What makes it so good? Because you play clubs all over the place. What's a bad room? What's a good room?
It's easy. The reason this is a good room is because, one, the lights are bright, the sound is good, and the audience is right on top of you. And the audience also, because they're so close, they feel a little uncomfortable with you being so close. And for that reason, they have a self-respect. They have a respect for the stage. And also the audiences, I think, have been coming here a lot, that they understand how this all works. That the comic goes up there, and yes, you interact with the audience, but largely you're going there to see a show. But the physical layout has a lot more to do with it, and bad clubs don't pay attention to sound, lights, or where the audience sits. And they do everything right here. They make sure the audience is taken care of. It's professional. There's door people seating you. People are taking care of your drinks. They're made to feel like they're at a good nightclub, a well-run nightclub where they care about the product. And they hire great comics.
And then how does that affect your act on stage if you're playing a room that doesn't do that?
Well, you have to play with elements of that. And when you do a good room, it's like, well, I'm used to using tools in my arsenal to deal with bad things in the show, like bad lights, bad layout, groups of people who are not, bachelorette parties or stag parties or whatever. And not that those elements don't happen everywhere, but you realize it's like, oh, I have to just do the stuff that I like. I have to do the funny stuff. And that's an odd adjustment, which is like, oh, I get to just be a comic. That's an interesting thing. I haven't done that in a lot.
So does it take you a couple shows to weed out those?
A little bit, yeah. And Vancouver's is it's a professional, urban, international city that's unlike any other. I'm sure you know. I mean, if you travel, Toronto is different from Vancouver. Everywhere is different. This has its own element, and I think, in my perception, everyone loves it. Everyone loves it. I was on the phone today. Where are you? I'm in Vancouver, BC. Oh, I love it. I love it up there. I love it. It's a beautiful city. Everyone adores this city. And I think people who live here really like it, and they like coming to the club, and they like living here. They're not miserable like some crowds you come where they're like, oh, we live here, and we're not happy at all about it.
It's no Portland, though, let's face it.
What is, really?
And finally, what is Byron Allen really like? Now there was a guy. He used to do the Tonight Show, right?
Yeah, he was
the young guy. He was like 19.
Yeah, one of the youngest guys to ever do it. Byron Allen has his own industry, empire that makes a lot of money for him. Everyone is bewildered how it works. Yeah. But what I want to say is, there's really no one that is of his caliber, which is making lots of money and producing his own stuff, that cares about stand-up as much as he does. He really reveres it, and he loves it. And that's all he thinks about is stand-up.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And how to make it good, and how to show people it.
His show is an interesting concept, where you're sitting down and just doing your act for 3 minutes or whatever.
Where it appears like a conversation.
It appears like a conversation, yeah. But does he still go out and perform?
I think he's too busy. I think he's satisfied with being sort of the interviewer, and I think he knows how hard stand-up is, and he doesn't really need to go out and do it. So, but I've always just really admired that he has a great reverence for stand-up, and he loves stand-ups. He loves them.
Yeah, he's a good laugher.
Yep, got to be.
Got to be. All right, Dwight. It's always a pleasure talking with you.
Pleasure.
I'm glad we could arrange this at the last minute.
I know, it's great. It's great. And in case this airs and there was something tragic in the world, I think we should do some liners where we go, well, in light of what happened today, and our thoughts are with the families.
Okay, another one? And I'll slice these in.
This may not be appropriate in light of what has happened today.
You're a pro. You know these things. I don't know. You did radio, right?
I did talk radio for like 2 or 3 years.
How was that?
It was great, but a lot of work, and sometimes I miss it, but sometimes I'm real glad I'm not doing it.
And was it serious, or you always have infuse humor into what you do, I assume?
We were hired, myself and another comic, were hired to be sort of the comic relief and talk about issues of the day at the end of the day. It's sort of like you get your news in the morning, you talk about it in the afternoon, and by the evening you're supposed to be able to laugh at it. We were sort of like the Daily Show, but with callers. That was what we were sort of modeled after.
Callers are the worst, aren't they?
Yes. But it was also the year 2000, which was the most contentious election in U.S. history between Gore and Bush, and we couldn't help but take sides, and it became very contentious and a lot of yelling and argument, and it wasn't our forte.
So you and your partner... Oh, you mean with the callers?
Yes.
Right.
We were on a very
because you were in Portland and everyone's liberal, and of course you're a big Republican.
Well, I think what it was is we were on a conservative station.
Okay.
And Al Gore's people called up and said, "Hey, can we get on that show?" And we were like, "Yeah." But then we come across as being Gore supporters, which we were. But then now there's partisanship, and now there's bickering, and so.
So you don't miss that part of it.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, and you mentioned last night, we'll end on this then, Bill Hicks, you said it's interesting how when he died in 94, that was around the time Bill Maher and who else?
Bill Stanhope.
Those guys really
took. And Lewis Black to a degree. In other words, and as I said, it was almost as if Bill came here, showed how it was done, planted the seeds, and got on a spaceship and left. And oddly enough, you look at Louis C.K., you look at all these stand-ups, it's almost as if he set the bar, and we're all responsible for getting to that bar.
Yeah, it'd be a religion started, the Hicksian something. Right?
Yes.
He's an L. Ron Hubbard type.
Oh, okay.
No.
We could go that route.
What is that noise? That's time that we end this thing.
It's indicated when the building is.
All right. Thanks, Dwight.
Thank you, Guy.
You enjoy that? I did. I enjoyed listening to it again, second time, after recording it a few weeks ago. My interview with Dwight Slade. Thank you, Dwight, if you're listening, for being so open and honest and interesting. Next week, it's another American stand-up comedian. This one doubles as a political activist. We'll find out which he puts first, political activism or comedy. Lee Camp is our guest next Sunday. In 2 weeks' time, Norm Macdonald.